How's it going, everyone? It is Dark Ops here. It's been a little while since I last uploaded. I know I haven't uploaded in a hot minute, but I am still trying to get the Tomb review out as soon as possible. So once this video is done, I'm going to have this uploaded, and then afterwards the Tomb review will be coming out sometime, hopefully next week. But tomorrow you're going to be seeing this video as of the time of this recording. So I apologize for that in advance. But today we're talking about the history of bad perks. Now the reason I wanted to work on this video in particular is because with the recent string of perks we've been getting, with Mule Kick and eventually Tombstone being leaked to being added into the game, that means we'll be getting Death Perception, a worse Vulture Aid, Tombstone, and Mule Kick as our quote-unquote new perks. That is disastrous. That's just 4 perks straight up that are not worth buying. And I have to understand why this is the case, when in the past, we usually get a good perk at least in between the ones that are bad. So if we go into Black Ops 2 for example, we got Electric Cherry, and we also got Tombstone, and we also got Vulture Aid, the better version, in that game. But I'm getting a little ahead of myself. Let's go back to when the bad perks started first being added in. Now this first one's a bit debatable depending on who you ask, and the endless Black Ops 6 fanboys who insist that Double Tap 1 is actually good, we're talking about Double Tap 1. This was introduced all the way back in World at War with the original 4 perks, and essentially all it would do is increase your fire rate. That's it, that's all it would do. Now the biggest problem with this perk, the one that everyone claims to all the time, is the fact that just because it increases your fire rate doesn't mean it increases your damage, and if anything it just means you're going to lose ammo faster. Now with some guns this actually did help out. In Black Ops 1 I can think of a few guns like the HK-20 or something like that that actually did help increase the fire rate, and it also applies to wonder weapons, so for the ray gun it would increase the fire rate. Little things like that do apply to make it somewhat useful, so it's not necessarily a trash perk per se. I think it's the first perk in the series where people thought, yeah, this isn't all that great. Not exactly as good as Jug or Speed Cola or Quick Revive. Any of the alternatives are better than Double Tap 1.0. But what about the newest addition? We got Stamina Up and PhD, both excellent perks. And then we move on to Deadshot. Now the problem with Deadshot, remember if you're on PC, Deadshot doesn't apply to you. So right away, anyone playing on PC, Deadshot is immediately worthless. And Treyarch must have known this because Deadshot was actually cheaper on PC. I think it still is cheaper on PC, and it's 1,000 points instead of 1,500. So that's the first perk you could kind of tell, yeah, this perk is not good whatsoever. It's not that it was necessarily bad or harmed you per se, but it just wasn't all that helpful, especially considering that it's on Call of the Dead. So you have multiple perks to choose from, including PhD, which I think most people run as well. So if you're running that, why would you ever run Deadshot? Unless you got it for free, there would be no reason to actually go out and buy it. So the first real bad perk, the real stinker, was Deadshot. Now if we move on to Moon, when we get introduced to Mule Kick, this perk was pretty mixed reception. I would say that some people used it, a lot of people wanted it, but ultimately, as time went, people realized that it's not all that great a perk. As a matter of fact, it's pretty bad, considering it's 4,000 points. Now remember, in the early days, you would just have to get points the normal way. You couldn't use Gobblegum, couldn't use anything else to get points but the normal way of getting them. So 4,000 points was a lot of investment, and you could lose it. So if you lost Mule Kick, you would lose your third weapon, making it a really expensive perk, and not one that most would choose to run specifically for that reason. Now does this mean Mule Kick is completely worthless? No. And in future iterations like Black Ops 4, where you could actually keep it if you have it in your modifier slot, or in Cold War, where the modifier is integrated into the perk, it does become a lot more helpful, but it's still too expensive for what it's offering. Now the price doesn't necessarily apply in Cold War, but you know, it's a different point system. We're not talking about that bullshit here. All I'm saying is that Mule Kick is generally considered to be one of the worst perks, while still having a loyal fan base of those who want it to come back. Even to this day in Black Ops 6, there are still people who want it to come back. I personally don't. I would rather see something new, or even Widow's Wine come back. But regardless, Mule Kick is still considered to be one of the worst perks, even if it has some loyal fan base that actually do appreciate for what it does and are willing to pay 4,000 points just to even have the damn thing in the first place. Now following Mule Kick, we would end up getting 2 of the worst perks in Zombies history. We first get Tombstone in everyone's favorite map, Transit.
Rest in pieces, down for the count.
And And what makes the Tombstone even worse in this iteration is that you could only get it on multiplayer. So if you were playing solo, you didn't even get a new perk. Okay, that sucks already. But if you are playing with multiple people, guess what? You have to commit seppuku just for it to even work. You have to essentially die, let yourself die for the perk to even work in the first place. Sure, you might say it's an insurance in case you end up going down, but you are essentially betting on the fact that your teammates suck and can't revive you. Now, I can think of maybe one use for this perk. One use. That being on town, where you can get all 6 perks by using that glitch. But even still, why would you even bother getting Tombstone in the first place, other than to basically bet on the fact that you're going to die, and that your teammates suck, and that you suck? That's basically what Tombstone says if you buy it straight off, unless you're doing it for some other glitch since it's so broken in Black Ops 2. Now, I did say that there were 2 perks here. Tombstone, and then in Die Rise, we got one of the absolute worst ideas known to man. Who's who? I don't know who's fucking who, but it's certainly not in this perk. This perk is absolutely worthless. I cannot... Somebody explain it to me. How does Who's Who have a purpose when Quick Revive exists on solo? And even on multiplayer, you are still betting on the fact that your teammates can't come and get you, so you would rather buy a perk to do it yourself. Only that you can only use your starting pistol regardless of the round. So even if you're down in the 30s, 40s, 50s, you only have your starting pistol. And guess what? If you have Quick Revive on solo and you get killed with Who's Who, the game ends. So it effectively takes away your Quick Revive if you happen to get it as a free perk. That is absolutely one of the worst ideas for a perk ever. It's such an unnecessary handicap. Why can't I just be revived if I happen to die in Who's Who? Why does Who's Who not give you your weapons or your perks? Could you imagine how much better it would be if it gave you just, I don't know, the liquefier and your perks back? Something like that, but no. Instead, they choose to nerf it so that you can only use your starting pistol, and you have a limited time too. If you don't pick yourself up within a certain amount of time in Who's Who, let's say you're on round 50 or something like that, and you're running around the horde of zombies because, again, you only have the starting pistol, and you don't pick yourself within, I believe, 2-3 minutes, you die, and Quick Revive doesn't apply. It doesn't make any sense. Why doesn't Quick Revive apply here? Just to fix one of the handicaps of the stupid perk. Who's Who? I don't know Who's Who, but it's certainly not a good perk, and easily the worst in Black Ops 2. And thankfully, it would be the worst perk for quite some time, as in Black Ops 3, we only ended up getting one new perk, that being Widow's Wine, and Widow's Wine ended up being a godsend, so we don't need to talk about any perks in that game. We've already covered Mule Kick and Deadshot, and of course Who's Who and fucking Tombstone. I already got a headache from that section. But let's go on to Black Ops 4, where we have a shit ton of perks to talk about. Now, before I start this section, I do want to say that I'm just going to be covering the perks that I think are objectively bad. So I'm not going to be saying something like, oh, well, Stronghold is bad because you can't use it while training, or anything like that. I'm just going to be covering about perks that are absolutely worthless and are just objectively some of the worst that Treyarch has ever made, or just not worth using whatsoever. So if you don't see Stronghold or any perk that's for specific strategies, know that it's not a bad perk. It's just that it's for specific strategies only and doesn't make it actually bad. So with that out of the way, let's talk about the first perk here. I think you guys all saw it coming. It's Blaze Phase. Blaze Phase is just not good whatsoever. I don't think anybody's going to argue with me when I say it's probably the worst perk objectively out of any of them. Even Who's Who, you can at least revive yourself or something. But Blaze Phase, it actually pretty much does nothing. The modifier is fun, but why would you ever run it there? It's just objectively the worst perk ever conceived, and I never understood how this made it into the actual main game. It's so disgustingly bad, and I believe it cost around 3,000 to 4,000 points. Absolutely ludicrous just to get the ability to essentially dash across the fucking game. It's absolutely worthless. I don't understand why this perk even exists, and I think most people agree it's absolutely worthless and a trash perk. Making its debut, not from Black Ops 6 or Cold War, in Black Ops 4 we have Death Perception. This perk, I do not care what its fans have to say about it, it is just not good whatsoever. You have to be a complete noob to be utilizing this perk. Its modifier isn't necessarily bad. It does increase damage on special enemies. That's actually a pretty good ability until you consider that's its modifier slot. You have to put it into the modifier to make it work, which for specific strategies can work, and I can see it being used. But Deadshot in this game actually has a similar modifier, but it applies to all enemies. So Deadshot in this game would actually be a better use than Death Perception. All it does is basically let you see through walls. Like, why would you ever run this perk when you can just, I don't know, be self-aware of where you're going, just look around? I know the spawns in Black Ops 4 aren't the greatest, but come on now, do you really need a whole perk dedicated just so you can see more, just so you can see a little indicator? It's really not all there, and honestly, for anything damage-wise, just run Deadshot. Deadshot in Black Ops 4 got a pretty big glow-up, at least in comparison to its previous versions, so you wouldn't want to run anything besides Deadshot if you want to increase damage in that way, and Death Perception certainly is not that, so Death Perception, absolute garbage tier. Now, I did want to bring an honorable mention because I don't think this perk is actually too bad. Ethereal Razor. So Ethereal Razor is interesting because it actually is really good for specific strategies. It can be useful on Blood of the Dead. It can be useful on Alpha Omega. It's actually a pretty useful perk. But the problem I have with it, and perks like it, you know, Melee Makato, which we'll be talking about later, the problem with perks like that is it's dedicated to melee build. It is essentially dedicated to melee attacks only, which, as you know, is a very bad idea in a game like Zombies, where it can get you killed. Now, it does fix some of the side effects with that. You know, you have swipe attacks that can hit entire hordes at once instead of just one enemy at a time. It heals you whenever you get kills. Very useful perk. But for 4,000, and then in the modifier slot to even get access to more abilities for 6,000 points, I just don't think it's worth all that money. I just don't think it's worth it for most people. Now, I don't think it's necessarily the worst perk. It's definitely not the worst in this game. It's not the worst ever made, but it's certainly not a great or maybe not even a good perk because you just have to be specifically running a melee build. And I don't know a lot of people who do that. So it's very situational. I don't think it's necessarily bad, but it's certainly not one of the greatest. And I just wanted to mention it because it's certainly not a great or good perk. It's just okay. It's just average. It's not necessarily bad, but I wouldn't put it in good. I just wanted to bring it up because I don't think it's necessarily a good perk. Alright, entering Cold War, we have a two-time nominee. We have Tombstone yet again. Tombstone, what are you doing here, bro? Tombstone is actually worse in this game because at launch, you had to pay to get your shit back. That's right, you had to put all your points to get your stuff back. That's actually, I've never seen such stupidity with a perk. Why would you put all your points into Tombstone when Quick Revive in this game has a tier that you can upgrade to revive yourself? Quick Revive is legitimately a better who's who in Tombstone, which is what Tombstone is trying to be. Tombstone is worthless in this game. I have nothing much else to say other than its added tiers are just worse because they turned it into who's who. And they fixed some of the problems with it. You do get your weapons back, all that. But still, it just isn't worth it. It's just not worth running when you have Quick Revive. Quick Revive literally exists in the game that serves the exact same purpose, except you keep all your perks and you can revive yourself while you're down. No reason to get Tombstone. Get the hell out of here, Tombstone. No one wants you, bro. Now, before I continue, I'm actually not going to talk about Death Perception from Cold War, as it's the only version of the perk that I actually think is remotely useful. That being the reason because salvage is so important in this game compared to future installments like Black Ops 6, where salvage is kind of more streamlined. Here, you do need more rare salvage, and it does help with that. It helps with loot, so it's actually relatively useful in this game. So I will give it some credit. Cold War did make Death Perception more useful at the cost of being a shitty game. I can't say that. I'm not going to say that, but I will just say that Cold War made Death Perception more useful. So that's all I have to say on the matter. Alright, now I get to mention everyone's favorite perk that Treyarch decided to add in for whatever reason, Melee Makato. I am no coffee expert, but I can tell you that this is shit. Melee Makato exists for the sole purpose of making the swords better on Citadel. But that's if you're just playing Citadel. That's the only reason you would ever run it, is for Citadel to make the swords better. That's the only reason, dude. I'm telling you, I cannot think of another reason why you would ever run this perk. This perk legit exists to haunt my dreams. It only exists to be in my nightmares. A worse version of Ethereal Razor, but it's for your dedicated melee slot because Treyarch thought, yeah, let's add in a dedicated melee slot. That's such a useful innovation. No, Treyarch, it's not. And now we got one of the worst perks to ever exist. I genuinely don't understand why this perk exists, guys. Can somebody come up with a reason why this perk exists other than to just be a fucking filler perk? Does anybody buy this perk? Like, honest to God, does anybody actually run this perk for a main strategy besides the fucking swords on Citadel? I can't think of another strategy. This perk is genuine garbage. Maybe this might be worse than Who's Who. honestly, this might be worse than Who's Who, because at least with Who's Who, I can revive myself. If you're lucky, you can pull a strat, you can revive yourself. It can be useful, and there are some glitches where you can get more points, more perks. Who's Who can be glitched and can be useful. Melee Makato cannot. Yeah, sure, it has some augments that can heal you or whatever. So fucking what? That's just a worse version of Ethereal Razor that can do all that in its prime. Here, it can't even do that without you having to switch the augments around. It's just so bad. And the worst part of it is that it basically only works for the punch, okay? It gives you a punch, so some of the augments only work to that punch, not to your actually melee weapon. So some augments you have to use for the swords, the rest just make your punch stronger, faster, whatever the hell. Why? Like, why, man? I don't understand. This is such a pointless idea. I don't get it. You know, yeah, this perk is just making me have a headache, guys. I'm gonna fucking end the video here. If you guys enjoyed this video, please hit that like button and subscribe. I could use you a new addition to the Dark Ops army. And if you would like to support this channel more, please check out the join button and read up on the membership. You get perks, you get icons, you get all that good stuff. I just thought I'd mention it because it lets you support the channel more than you already do, which is perfectly fine by me. So if you'd like to become a member, please consider joining in the join button below. But thank you guys so much for watching. I'll be uploading soon more. I promise the Tomb review is on its way. But thank you guys so much for watching. This is Dark Ops, signing off.